Welcome everybody to This Week in X. I'm here with my colleagues and friends, Tyler and Harry, and we are here to discuss Hellions number 8 out on the 6th of January, 2021. So spoiler warning, we're going to talk about everything in this issue. Every panel and dialogue balloon is on the table for discussion, and we may also spoil other events from the X-Men line from 1963 to present, or maybe even talk about the rest of the Marvel Universe. If you want to hear more about the other book out this week, which is X Factor number 6, you can look for another video on this same channel. And with that, we will dig in. So I think we can just do our lightning round, kind of first reaction off the cuff from the gut, and then we will get into discussing it a little bit more deeply. So Tyler, first reaction.
I think that this issue appears to be a really straight up fight issue, but seeded cleverly within it is some stories that would definitely come into play, I think, in a larger way in the future. And this also happens to be the very first time I enjoyed Segovia's art, like completely, without any reservations or without any, if only he has done this, I would have given it 100%. But in this issue, I can unreservedly give it 100%.
Awesome.
Like 100 out of 100. I really like it.
Wow. That's great.
Harry.
I thought it was like the definition of solid. And I do not mean that in like a backhanded negative way. I just think this is the book operating very well and knows what it's doing. This is just like a good continuing chapter. I don't think it was as funny as the last issue, but I love the last issue so much that like it's one of those things where this one doesn't quite compare. But yeah, like the art's really good, and it raises some really interesting kind of plot points for the future, and it shades the council in a very interesting way, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I had a great time. It's a good book.
I felt very similarly too. To me, this was like the definition of right there, good, not quite great, maybe. I think the fight beats were kind of similar to the fight beats from the opening arc with the Goblin Queen, so it didn't seem as remarkably funny, but there was a lot of good material. It raised some really interesting questions, and like I can't be mad at it. It's kind of still the best book in the X-Men line, maybe. So I came away with some real positive feelings as well, and I think there's some really fun stuff to discuss.
Yep,
for sure.
The first topic I want to dig into, maybe not the biggest one, but it kind of happens first, is Wild Child and Nanny, right? The battle starts, and Wild Child and Nanny just have this look and just run right past the monologuing villain, which to me is really delightful, right? Like, why do we see this more often? Too much talking.
Well, the best part is you have their balloons imposed on his monologuing balloons, which is just
I thought it was maybe like
really
a mistake
good.
at first.
I mean, it happens twice this week.
Yeah. X Factor too. Yeah.
I know.
And let's just talk a minute. I mean, it was a great gag to begin with, but let's talk about the impact beneath it a little bit, because it's more evidence that Nanny and Wild Child are not the same, and they actually acknowledge it to each other in dialogue this week, Tyler.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think towards the end of the issue, they were talking about each other, like was it towards the end or maybe somewhere? They were talking about like the Amenth isn't through with us yet.
This is really cool. This is just like good. Like this is taking like that crossover, and it is interesting where they're going with it. And that isn't always the case with crossovers. So like, it's just funny that like this huge thing that actually has repercussions still with these characters. It's like, that was kind of the part I was the most invested in. Like, where is this going? And it's nice to kind of have that feeling with like this unexpected book.
And in some ways, I think Hellions basically, you can actually read Hellions without reading the Ten of Swords crossover, including those chapters in the crossover, and just read it through, and you get all the information that you need.
And I think, again, just like with last time in Hellions with the cape, where we didn't expect, or maybe that was actually paid off in Excalibur, but it originated in Hellions with Sinister, and the cape paid off. And in the same way with these people, dying in Amenth, it's paying off in this really intriguing way. Wild Child just is more of like an alpha, and that's a little bit of an easier thing to read. But Nanny, there's some really interesting things with Nanny. She's like a little bit more insane, a little bit more violent. And do we really think she would have, I mean, not to skip right to the end, but would she have really abducted this robot baby in the way that she does in this issue pre-Amenth changeover? Is that normal Nanny behavior?
Doesn't seem like it, even though the motivation is very similar. And I think this super focused, super sharpened Nanny would have taken that step, but maybe pre-resurrection, pre her death in Amenth, before she was like super focused, before that, I think she might have just said that, oh, okay, this is not natural, and I'm not even going to bother about this.
Yeah, what's cool about it is, before she was, a bit more whimsical and kind of felt like along for the ride, and now she has this kind of intent, and you have all these and you have these characters that are all, what this issue felt for me is that you're kind of realizing every single character kind of has their own thing going on that they're hiding from the rest of the group. And then Nanny now is like another character who's introducing her own thing into this big mix. And it's just like getting more and more interesting as we go on.
But you do see her intensity before, because remember that scene, which is my favorite scene in Hold of the X-Line last year, where she basically go up to Sinister and threaten him. So the intensity has always been there. It's just not like super focused. That's not her primary focus right now. But right now, I think everything is just like basically sharpened to that point, and she's just doing this thing.
It's kind of cool that you have, when you say, oh, the character has been sharpened or honed, it's kind of like, well, what does that actually look like in practice? But no, they're actually showing these characters have become much more mission oriented or driven with their own kind of personal goals. It's just kind of like making good on that odd kind of phrasing.
Yeah, and I think, when we first opened this book almost a year ago, there was a question about how much it mattered to have these group of people together. They all seemed like throwaways. Why do we care about Empath? Why do we care about Grey Crow, or especially Nanny, right? Like Wild Child. These are nobody's favorite, somebody's favorite, because X-Twitter exists, but not overwhelmingly. And it really does feel like they all have a place here now. And I'm showing up to see like what develops next. And so it's really fascinating to have that with Nanny. Like, what is she plotting now? And of course, still unspoken, what is Orphan Maker's deal? And that he can't be exposed, not answered here in this issue. We do get a really interesting moment, which I want to use to bridge into the next topic of Empath in the fight tries to use his powers on Cameron Hodge, thinking he's human. Of course, Cameron Hodge has been through the revolving door of death many times in the course of the X-Men, and he doesn't. And he says, "You're a robot," which is great. But also it brings up this long-running trope in X-Men comics about the degrees of difference between humanity and robots, and also robots and mutants. We've had the idea of like, are you a human or are you a robot, with things like Karima Shapandra as the Omega Sentinel. And we've also had the ideas of, if Sentinels can adapt, are they not mutant? And that's been played too. And this kind of whole confrontation exists in that same spectrum. And surprisingly, Empath, who you would think would be useless in this fight, is the key to it. So what do we think about the idea that this Cameron Hodge, typically a mutant-hating bigot back from original X Factor days, turns out to just be another robot in this farce, Tyler?
I think it is I actually forgot what happened to him after his head was being sliced off in Extinction Agenda, because I remember him coming back in the Hellions, what was that crossover? Hellions Covenants?
Yeah. He's been back at least 3 times, at least.
Yeah, and then I can't remember any other appearance after that. And I was like, okay, so this one, obviously, he's still infected with a techno-organic virus. And I think the emerging AI and the techno-organic Cameron Hodge is like fighting each other, because like almost right from the beginning, the robots is like questioning his orders, and he has to override them several times for them to be for them to become murderers.
Harry,
what do you think?
Well, yeah, I was going to say earlier that Peter, you said it first, but like, empath for once is kind of useful, or he has the closest thing this guy's going to get to a hero moment since he sucks so hard. But like, this is where the tables turn because of him, and that was kind of fun in the book. I don't have a quarter as much history with this character, but I did find it interesting, just like his invasive kind of programming conflicting with theirs, and getting this whole like little mini faction battle between AIs in the middle of this this big fight scene, basically.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I have so much I could say about that. And I want to keep it under control. I've been having an interesting discussion with folks, and this will be reflected in our other discussion this week, X Factor, about, when you have a problematic character, a character who's done things that you can't look at in the same way now, do you rehabilitate them or do you acknowledge it, right? And so that's always the thing with Daken because of what he's been used for. And Empath is the same. Like I've been reading the 200s of X-Men, the 30s of New Mutants, and he basically uses his power to make Magneto send the New Mutants to Emma's Academy, and then Magneto's like, I'm gonna kill him. And I mean, he's just constantly bad. And I really enjoyed that this series is not trying to rehabilitate him, but trying to show that like the Hellions have to rely on how unscrupulous he is. So without getting into a whole summit about if he's terrible and he should be canceled by the other characters or anything like that, his unscrupulousness of just barging into somebody's brain unbidden totally pays off for the team here, because it makes this reveal, which I think is really interesting. But then we get to the other side of that, which is the robots. It kind of subverted my expectation. I would have thought the robots would have been like, one of us. But no, when they realized the Cameron Hodge was just another robot, things took a turn. Was that what you expected in that moment?
No, I mean, that's what this book is so good at. Yeah, it's like this book. Go on, Katara. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, this book just makes the zigzag choice every time, and it kind of keeps you like not uncertain, but kind of like enjoying that, where these two characters will run past the villain's speech. The villain will get turned away by the other robots, and you're never quite sure what's going to happen next, which is like a fun feeling for a book of all these I don't want to say, just these different characters, these oddballs.
Say what you're going to say. Throwaway, trash. What were you going to say?
I was going to say D-listers, but I know people like Havoc. I don't think he's a D-lister. To be clear, don't cancel me, X.
Yeah,
people.
Don't come. All right. So we get this weird moment after that where the robots are like, "Thank you, mutant scum." And we get this whole little mini arc of Havoc being like, mutant scum is actually a mean thing to say, but I appreciate your gratitude, which I tend to personally zone out a little bit on robot dialogue. Like sometimes I'm like, all right, great. Like, whatever, terminated, whatever, accepted.
Yeah.
But this was genuinely funny. I think Wells leveraged the robot dialogue for some like really, really funny comedic moments here. I don't know. Was I the only one finding it hilarious?
I enjoyed that it's continuing the theme of AI showing affection and just being like obliterated shortly after. I think that's kind of fun. But it was just cool. This is a cool beat. What about you, Tyler?
I mean, this part, when I first read it, I laughed it off, and I was like, okay, they are like, they are emerging, so they are a little bit childlike. And then I went into the deep hole of like looking at certain things that has been presented to us all the way from Hotspots. So here the robot basically says the enemy of our enemy is our friends, right? And then they're like, okay, you guys are friends, human scum, and then mutant scum.
Yeah.
And then the robots try
family
to push,
mutant scum.
Yeah. And then they try to push themselves off humans' influences to make their own decision, right? And the end result is that they decide that mutants are friends. And also, this issue shows very clearly that a self-aware AI is neutral when it has no humans' influence whatever. Like even Clive, which has Sinister influence. Yeah, it's not evil, right? Like, it's just funny, but it's not evil. And then so therefore, is it fair? I mean, can we conclude that it is the human influences that turn an AI evil? And if that's the case, it casts the way that Krakoa is targeting emerging self-aware AI actually in a pretty bad light, because they are not taking that into consideration, right? So I'm not saying it's wrong outright. So let me finish this, because I'm really going down into a deep hole here. Because Moira learns that in her past nine lives, especially in life 7, that the rise of the machine is all but inevitable. And that is when she, that's when she got radicalized. And then Apocalypse in life 9 asked the question, why the machines are always pointed at mutants? Well, I mean, the answer is clearly presented here, because the rise of the machine has always been in response of the humans to curb the rise of the mutants. You take that part away, the AI is practically neutral. And also here, this emerging AI basically says there is no statistical differences between humans and mutants. They are practically the same. The deviation is too small. So I mean, I thought this was really interesting. And if we jump a little bit to the end, where there's this Charles Xavier's quote, it says, like fire, AI is a discovery, not an invention. And that is almost, well, that is sort of like a little bit of a twist of what Moira said in House of X 2. So it's kind of interesting thing here. And it also begs the question, like, how much of Charles Xavier's thinking right now is influenced by memories of Moira, and how much of it is his own? Okay, I'm done.
Wow.
That's a really good point. I wasn't thinking about Spider-Man 2. I was just going to
say, were you?
No, I looked at him. I don't see how you could look at the Quiet Council's kind of edict here regarding AI as anything but morally gray at most. It's framed so bad. It doesn't seem, I mean, I don't look at this as like representative of all AI, but just the fact that this is a actual pure promising moment between these two new groups and then just immediately gets obliterated because of the virus is like, that's, A, Alex needs therapy, and B, it's just showing that, Charles Xavier is not like infallible in this at all. This is super murky, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah, wow. I want to unpack a lot of layers of that, but I want to make sure that it's just not me talking. So let's go one at a time. So first, Havoc, who has needed therapy since at least 1986. Havoc is making friends while Quanon Psylocke slips away to kind of pull the trigger on this code insert. And Grey Crow is going to do it for her. And she's like, you don't always have to be the killer. Great moment. And so she pulls the trigger. But there's this interesting cycle there, right? Where like Havoc's the big hero on the team, but he's kind of there because, if I'm remembering correctly, Emma asked him to be there, or at least told him to still be there. Emma's on the council. And this protocol does come from the council, but Psylocke is the one that's putting the play into play. But Psylocke's more of an agent of Sinister, also on the council. And we get this moment of the two of them working specifically across purposes, even though they both think they're carrying out the will of the council in their own way, which to me is, I think, one of the first examples that we've seen the inter-council conflict really played out by surrogates in another book. Did that stick out at all?
Alex got onto Hellions initially. He volunteered himself in because he had this moment where he became the inverted, is that what they call, or the axis, the axis version of him, right? And then later on, of course, Emma says, "No, you're not leaving."
Right, he tries to quit, and Emma won't let him quit. Yeah.
But I thought in this issue, I thought Quanon is like saying that, oh, this is from Charles Xavier, it's not from Sinister, and Sage is the one that sort of like created the virus and put it in.
Yeah, I kind of took it more as Xavier's kind of personal expression or kind of his orders. But it is interesting seeing that these figures are all starting to operate under different camps within the council's kind of approaches towards this thing. I didn't think about it as deeply as you did, Peter, but it was cool.
No, well, but it also says that Quanon is basically sort of free agents, or free agent for like two different sides of two different quarters of the council.
That to me is what I'm picking up on. And I want to point out the specific dialogue that she has when Grey Crow interrupts her. I'm silent with Krakoa, So that suggests Xavier, probably. Then she says, Magneto has given us a final task. Not one of the captains or commanders, but Magneto from the council. Hodge's machines are infected with his techno-organic virus, and they're evolving, thinking. Sage, not on the council, but to Tyler's point, part of X-Force, part of security, thinks they're close to self-replication, which is why she has connected them to the Krakoan server. So there's a couple of different layers, and to both of your points, no Sinister anywhere that can be seen, which does kind of make her almost like the mercenary here, truly, which in a way is fun to have as an X-Men character. Like, we don't have a lot of characters who kind of will just do whatever they feel like is the best instruction. We have Wolverine who will kind of just go off and do whatever he's going to do. But I'm kind of intrigued by the idea, like, is she going to have to go back and justify this to Sinister? It's really fascinating to me.
No, it is, and I think we are beginning to see a little bit of Conan's characterization coming out that is sort of slightly different from Betsy.
Right, this is not a Betsy move.
Yeah.
No.
So I think that's always a good thing because, you know, I mean, the visual thing is that you keep thinking she's Betsy. She's thinking she's Betsy, right? But you have to, you know, I mean, Wells basically try to establish her as like, no, I'm not the same person. And my motivations are different. And, you know, and I mean, so I really don't want to dump on Fallen Angels, but at least this is not doing the not taking the easy road. You know, it's not doing the sort of like trope thing with Asian ninja and
right.
You know,
oh, my honor.
Yeah. So it's nothing of that sort. So it's like totally different.
Well, so now I come to the third and final thing that I wanted to talk about, and I have to apologize in advance. I am no replacement for a classics expert like Zach, who is part of the Hicksman Report family here. But you have to look at that final data page that lays out the rules behind what they did. It's titled the Hesiod Protocol. Hesiod was a poet, and in the Greek tradition, and he is generally seen as the first poet to regard himself, I'm quoting here, as an individual persona with an active role to play in his subject. So before then, poets kind of were just retelling something. Hesiod actually makes himself a part of the retelling, which is a really fascinating thing to be calling your protocol about if AI has gotten too far down the path and that you have to poison the seed to fell the tree. But then to bring it back around to Tyler, and then I want to hear if the two of you have anything to say about it, you have this quote from Xavier, which is flavoring it even more because it's clearly about Prometheus, right? Like fire isn't made, it's brought. And it's this idea that you have to monitor who gets the fire, which of course ties it into a lot of things that happened with Mother Mold and House of X and Powers and X, and creates this greater fabric that they're not anti-AI, but they're anti-AI that can grow to harm them. But then can you extrapolate backwards and say, well, that makes us anti-all AI? We've seen Sentinels in the past say, turn against humans to be like, well, humans beget mutants, so we can kill humans too. This feels like the reflexive version of that. Like, well, AI can beget anti-mutant uncontrolled sentiment, so maybe we're actually going to judge each AI one by one and find them all wanting. Thoughts?
I mean, that's the thing that is inherently contradictory, right? Because it says that AI is not a discovery, it's a discovery and not an invention. So in that case, how are you going to put out all the ambles?
Right.
And if you start putting out ambles, the other AIs, the other emerging AIs, is going to start viewing you as the villain.
Right. There's no vacuum. You're putting out fires where every fire is aware of all the other fires. It's not. Exactly. It's not just putting out fires, and I mean,
even if they don't know it initially, like potentially they would know. They'll be like, oh, okay, this is happening, and with that, and with the action, there will of course be the reaction, which is like, you know, you are the enemy, as opposed to right here where, you know, basically Havoc is like teaching the baby AIs like, no, we are friends. No, don't use scum. You know, it's just like when you're teaching your kids, your kids hear you say a bad word. You're like, no, don't use that bad word. Not now. You know, later on when you grow up and you learn the meaning of it and you want to use it, yes, but don't use it now.
You know, it'd be interesting to see kind of like in kind of following this down the line. It's just some kind of AI that looks at the mutants as almost like a boogeyman that's been kind of taking out these AIs. I think just the Xavier, the protocol here just seems not doomed to fail, but definitely like fighting a losing battle here, where you can't, as you said, you can't put out every ember. Something's gonna respond in kind, and it just feels doomed. That's kind of how I felt when I was reading it. Like, this is not going to go where you want it to go, which is cool.
Yeah, well, an awful lot of deep stuff couched within a pretty funny confrontation between the robots and Havoc. And I think it's genuinely disturbing when they all fall to the ground spouting the Krakoan code. Tyler, what does the Krakoan code say when they're all malfunctioning?
My data banks. That's what they say.
I was joking earlier, but seriously, the moment where the robots all start to implode and you see Havoc's face of just like pain or just like horror, like that's an amazing moment. Like the Segovia really gets that across really
Exactly.
well. It's good.
And then you just look at the posture at the end of Grey Curl, Quanlen, and Alex,
all kind of individually contending with the part that they had in it.
Exactly.
And as Nanny monologues, I could make him smile. So any final departing thoughts on this Hellions issue, Tyler?
Not really. I think I already went down the deep hole earlier.
I mean, the more we've talked about it, the more I like this issue more. I mean, it's the kind of thing where it's like, it's not the best issue, but it's still like one of the best series. And you can kind of forget like the level of quality it's operating on until you take some time to think and talk about it. This is just like, it's just the stuff this book is juggling without it feeling like it's juggling anything and being really interesting while funny. It's like, this book's amazing.
No, I mean, I agree. Like the ease of Wells like juggling different character moments and potentially different like plots, future plots, whatever. It is really good. Sorry, Peter, I interrupted you.
No, it's fine. I was just going to say, this is where sometimes judging issue by issue can fail you a little bit, because we were saying at the beginning, this is good, not great, or great, not excellent, but it is excellent. It's carrying through every theme that we like about this story. And we just have to accept at this point that individual issues are part of an arc. So, as an individual issue, is it our favorite issue we've read in the last year of X-Men? No. Is it continuing what might be the most weirdly, transgressively exciting X-Men series right now? Yeah, still it totally is. And so that's really exciting to me. That brings us to the end of This Week in X for this issue. Again, if you want to hear us talking about X Factor number 6, tune in to another video on the channel. And we would love it if you'd subscribe and listen and join in the discussion every week. We love when you comment, and you've seen Tyler is a very active responder to your comments, because we really do think that X-Men is better when it's read together. And that doesn't just encompass the three of us, that encompasses all of you as well. So for myself and my friends, Tyler and Harry, we thank you so much for listening, and we hope that you are back again with us next week for more of This Week in X presented by Crushing Comics. Be well.
Bye.
Bye.